On behalf of the Society for the Visually Handicapped, I, Aditi Dhar, am reading from The Coolie by Mulk Raj Anand. Page number 1, chapter number 1. Munnu, ohe Munnu, O Mundu, shouted Gujri from the veranda of a squat, sequestered little mud hut thatched with straw, which stood upon the edge of a hill about 100 yards from the village in the valley, and her eagle eyes explored the track of gold dust which worked in zigzag course through rough scrub beyond the flat roofs of the village houses under the relentless haze of the Kangra sun. She could not see him. Munnu, ohe Munnua, O Mundu, where have you died? Where have you drifted? You of the evil star, come back. Your uncle is leaving soon and you must go to the town. She shouted again with a shrill, hoarse voice, and her gaze travelled beyond the mango grove of the silver line of the river Bias and roved angrily among the greenery of the ferns and weeds and bushes that spread on either side of the stream against the purple gleam of the low hills. Munnu, ohe Munnua, she called again, exasperated and raising her voice, this time to the highest pitch to which in her anger and hate she could carry it. Where have you died? Where have you gone, you ominous orphan? Come back and be gone. The piercing soprano resounded through the valley and fell on Munnu's ears with the deadening effect of all its bitter content. He heard but did not answer. He merely turned from the shade of the tree where he sat hidden to see her scarlet dress disappearing into the hut. He had been grazing cattle on the banks of the Bias and had begun to play while the buffaloes and cows in his charge had entered the low waters of the marsh, where they now sat stewing the cud of little comfort that the cool of the water afforded against the torrid heat of the morning sun. Your aunt is calling you, said Jai Singh, son of the village landlord, clean of face and apparel, nudging Munnu's bare body with his elbow. Can't you hear? Have you no manners, you savage, that you let your aunt shout herself hoarse and don't answer her? He was Munnu's rival for leadership of Bhishan and Vishambar. And end of page 1, beginning of page 2. The other village boys. He knew that Munnu was to depart for town that day and he wanted to hurry him out of the way as soon as possible. Don't go yet, said Bhishan. The fat one pleaded. Your aunt only wants you to run an errand for her. Then he turned banteringly to Jai Singh and said, You call him a savage for not going home when his aunt calls. What about you, who abuse your mother for asking you to stay indoors and not go out in the heat of the noon? You won't even go to school, though your father gives you 2 annas a day for pocket money. We go to school and during the holidays we graze the cattle. What are you doing here, pray, if not idling? You haven't even the courage to steal a few mangoes. Munnu collected all these, so let him suck a few before he goes home. I don't steal mangoes, said Jai Singh. I buy them. And he continued righteously. I only said he ought to go because his aunt is so rude that she will abuse us for keeping him here. He has to go away to town with his uncle. It is true you are going away to town? Asked fiery little Vishambar. Yes, I am going away this morning, said Munnu, and felt a quiver go through his belly. But you are only 14 years old yet, and you are only in the 5th class at school, said Vishambar. My aunt wants me to begin earning money, said Munnu, and she says she wants a son of her own. My uncle says I am grown up and must fend for myself. He has got me a job in the house of a babu of the bank where he works in Shampur. It must be nice to live in Shampur, remarked Jai Singh, now jealous of the importance Munnu assumed in his eyes because he was going to live in town. where there were beautiful things to eat, beautiful clothes to wear, and beautiful toys to play with. Munnu smiled at this, but his smile seemed to say, "If it wasn't for my last day here, I would give you such a sock on the jaw that you would never dare to aspire to the leadership of the boys." For though Munnu was young, he had more than a vague idea of how Jai Singh's father was responsible for his impending misfortunes. He had heard of how the landlord had seized his father's 5 acres of land because the interest on the mortgage covering the unpaid rent had not been forthcoming when the rains had been. End of page number 2. Now page number 3. Scanty and the harvests bad. And he knew that his father had died a slow death of bitterness and disappointment and left his mother a penniless beggar to support a young brother-in-law and a child in arms. The sight of his mother grinding grain between the scarred surfaces of millstones, which she gyrated, gyrated, gyrated round and round by the wooden handle, now with her right hand and now with her left, day and night, had become indelibly imprinted on his mind. Also the sight of her as she had lain dead on the ground with a horrible yet sad set expression on her face had sunk into his subconscious with all its weight of tragic dignity and utter resignation. "Will you never come back?" inquired Jai Singh more insistently. "No, never. I never want to come back," replied Munnu, urged by a genuine bitterness to lie, although in his heart he knew it was better to irritate Jai Singh by telling the truth. For in spite of the fact that his aunt was always abusing him, in spite of the fact that she ordered him about, asking him to do this and to do that, in spite of the fact she beat him more than he beat his cattle, he really did not want to go to the town. At least not yet. He had dreamed, of course, of all the wonderful things which the village folk spoke about when they came back from the towns, the lalas, the babus and the sahibs from beyond the black waters, the silk clothes they wore and the delicacies they ate. He was especially interested in machines such as he had read about in the science primer of the 4th class, but he had meant to go to town when he had passed all his examinations here and was ready to learn to make machines himself. Meanwhile, it was pleasant to sit here with his fellows, all little boys of the same age as himself, for when they had stolen enough fruit during their wanderings behind the cattle in the morning, they ate it in the humid, sweet-scented shade of the banyan tree. Some fruit or other was always in season. Ripe yellow mangoes dropped from dozens in the spring and could be easily hidden in the grass and the hay. Purple and red jamuns and long green mulberries fell in sickly profusion during the summer and could be stored on broad banana leaves. In the winter, the stick-like sugar cane aroused no suspicion in the gardener, who drowsed lazily in his siesta. Then one could play. You can catch me only in the air when I, end of page number 3, now page number 4, am seated neither on earth nor on wood. This involved a constant jumping on and off trees, and Munnu was a genius at climbing trees. He would hop on the trunk like a monkey, climb the bigger branches on all fours, swinging himself to the thinner offshoots as if he were dancing on a trapeze, 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 and then diving dangerously into space. He would jump from one tree to another. And then there was the cool breeze which soothed the fatigue of the body and relieved the natural heat. The snow breeze that was rising even as he sat there, stirring the acacia trees, while the cicadas rasped in the thickets, the frogs croaked in the shallows and the swamps, The birds sang, the butterflies flitted over the wild flowers, and the insects buzzed over the pollen for honey. The blood of little Manu ran to the tune of this lavish beauty. Bhul. The blood of little Manu ran to the tune of all this lavish beauty, and he would rather have had all the machines come here than tear himself away from the sandy margins of the still black waters where he played. But Munnu, oye Munua, O Mundu, came his aunt's voice again. The face of his aunt, with its hard jaw, its bright red-cornered eyes, its sharp nose and thin lips, all in a malevolent framework of dark hair, flashed across his mind. He got up. All the boys, even Jai Singh, rose to their feet. He called his cattle. The boys shouted for their cows and buffaloes too. The bony hipped, thin-flanked, big-horned creatures emerged from the water, splashing mud in the bog. Dripping globules of froth trailed wearily ahead of their little guides, mute against the abuse and beatings that were used to urge them towards home a little more quickly than ever before. End of chapter number 1. Now chapter number 2. Walk quickly, you son of a bitch, shouted Dayaram, the chaprasi of the Imperial Bank of India, as he strode with big military strides in his gold-brocaded red coat and neatly tied end of page 4, beginning of page 5, white turban, along the circuitous hill road constructed by the Angrezi Sarkar, of which he felt himself to be the symbol as he flourished his hand ostentatiously and angrily at his nephew Munnu. The boy sat down to nurse his bare feet, which were sore and weary after a 10-mile march. The sun had been shining with a searing intensity, and he was perspiring under the thick cotton tunic which had originally belonged to his uncle and looked like a cloak about him. The ochre-colored dust which trailed behind the reckless bullock carts around the hairpin bends had got into his nose and irritated him. His olive face was flushed. His dark brown eyes were strained. He felt as if all the blood in his supple young body had evaporated as sweat and left him dry. Come quickly, or I will be late at the office, shouted Dayaram again. There was no question, of course, of his being either late or early at the office, as the chaprasi was on holiday, but he wanted to impress his nephew and the rustic passerby with the importance of the position he occupied in the service of the Angrezi Sarkar. There were tears in Munnu's eyes as he gazed at his blistered feet and felt a quiver of self-pity go through him. My feet hurt me, he sobbed in reply to his uncle's admonition. Come, said Dayaram irritably, and he stiffened his tall, lanky body, though he wanted to soften and be kind. Come, he continued, I will get you a pair of shoes out of your next month's pay. I can't walk, said Munnu, hearing the screeching brakes of a cart bringing it to a halt ahead of him, where the road bent sharply towards around a point 700 feet sheer above the gorging Bias. The driver will give me a lift if you ask him. No, he will want money if he lets you ride, said Dayaram loudly, so that the driver of the cart might hear and offer the ride free of charge. He felt much too dignified in his uniform to ask the man directly for a favor. Don't be too proud of your chaprasi hood and put the boy on the back here, said the cart driver bluntly, noticing Dayaram's manner. And you can get on the cart too. You must be warm in that red woolen coat. Don't you bark. I didn't talk to you, said Dayaram. Go your way, or I'll have you put in prison. Don't you know that I am a government official? End of page 5, now page 6. Acha, Enjoy yourself. Make the poor child walk barefoot, you torturer, retorted the driver and moved on. Get up, oh hey, you illegally begotten. You have been the bringer of disgrace to me. Get up or I'll kill you, exclaimed Dayaram, turning towards Munnu, his white teeth flashing. Munnu sprang up, knowing that his uncle's threats of beating always led to actual blows. He wiped the tears from his eyes with the back of his hand and followed his guardian in the torrid heat, abusing him in his mind. The curvy road inclined downwards, reaching out from the wild barren mountains to the limitless spaces of the lowlands. After he had gone a few hundred yards, with a heart contracted by fear and a head expanded by thoughts, his feet bore the burning earth more easily. He avoided the stones by hopping about and gave occasional relief to his soles by walking a while on his toes. He was more than grateful for half an hour in a tunnel, and he grew cheerful when he saw at the foot of the hill a large number of tall, flat-roofed houses crowded in irregular groups round the red stone minarets of the mosques and the golden domes of temples. He forgot the inconveniences of the journey at the prospect of the journey's end. As he descended from the hill, the sun above the plateau poured its lava of light on the city, flooding it with a brilliant hue, making its heterogeneous elements stand out vivid and large. Heterogeneous, Heterogeneous. The limitless mountains were being blotted out of Munnu's mind. He felt agreeably excited about his new surroundings and everything that crowded round him. He stared wide-eyed and open-mouthed at the marvels of different carriages, two-wheeled box-like bamboo carts and tongas, four-wheeled phaetons and landaus, and huge rubber-wheeled black-bodied fatfatis, which seemed to him curious as they ran without horses on the main road. Phaetons, 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 and landaus, Landaus, and wonder of all wonders, he saw a black iron vehicle with two round humps like the humps of a desert camel, with hosts of little brown houses studded with glass windows behind it, rushing along furiously, puffing out a foul black smoke and shrieking hysterically. It blew a shrill whistle and made his heart leap into his throat. "What is that animal?" he asked, rushing up to his uncle to still the thumping of his heart and to seek the confidence that knowledge brings. End of page number 6. Now page number 7. "That is the engine of the railgadi," his uncle replied, a little more kindly now that he was getting into the world where he could not pass himself off as the master he had pretended to be in the hills, but had again to be the slave of the imperial bank officials. The boy looked hard at the black monster, which, with a final shriek and much hoarse shouting, had now come to a standstill alongside a platform adjoining a solid hut. It released a multitudinous throng of men and women. It released a multitudinous throng of men and women clad in milk-white cottons and silks of hues more varied than those which Munru had ever seen in his life in the Kangra hills. Wonderful, he thought to himself, wonderful. Where is the cattle which these people graze, and where are the fields they plough, uncle? He asked, turning to Dayaram. They have no cattle and no fields here, said the chaprasi, pushing his neck back to stiff uprightness. It is only the rustics in the villages who graze cattle and plough the land. But how do they get their food, uncle? Munnu inquired. They have money, said Dayaram pompously. They have crores of rupees in my bank. They earn money by buying wheat, which the peasants grow, and by selling it as flour to the Angrezi Sarkar, or by buying cotton and making cloth and selling it at a profit. Some of them are babus who work in offices, like the babu in whose house you are going to be a servant. How strange, the child said, and he lagged behind, absorbed by the sight of huge cauldrons in the cook shops, which steamed with the most spicy smells he had ever smelt. Tiers of sweets, dripping with syrup, rose from the platform to ceiling in the sweet shops. Rubber balloons and little pink dolls and fluffy rabbit-like toys decorated the general stores. A stall-keeper was shouting, "Ices, cool ices," and emptying little conic tins onto leaf cups for some customers who sat on a wooden bench before him. Munnu felt he would have liked to taste one of those ices, but he dared not ask his uncle to buy him one. Instead, he became interested in the weird tin wail of a song which issued from a box on which a black disc revolved. He smiled at the voice in the box, trailed along. He retreated when it became hoarse, as if he were frightened, and then, recovering, he drew nearer. "Come, come, or you will get lost," his uncle called from a distance. "What is that singing? How does a man get into a box to sing?" he asked. End of page 7. Now page 8. The owner of the shop laughed and gave Munnu a contemptuous look. Hurry up, you fool," shouted Dayaram. "That is a phonogram. PHONOGRAM, phonogram. There is no man in the box, but the machine speaks." The boy dared not ask how the machine spoke. He tore himself away unwillingly from the wonderful spectacle and followed. Before he had gone a few yards, however, his gaze was arrested by the curious phenomenon of a little dog dolls which a man was setting into motion on the road after an ostentatious juggling with their sides. Tin, 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 tin. A bell suddenly rang behind Munru, and before he had time to see, a two-wheeled steel horse came towards him at a terrific speed. "Look out, you son of a gun," shouted the young man who sat astride it. Munnu stepped aside and barely escaped being knocked down into the gutter. "You illegally begotten, you will get killed, you idiot." A tirade of abuse descended on him from his uncle, who had rushed back. The toy seller came and dragged Munnu safely out of harm's way, saying consolingly, "Oh, he was only trying to make his bicycle run as fast as my dog's, but he didn't warn me that the race had begun. Don't you mind, everything is all right, no harm done. The proper way to treat abuse is to let it come in one ear and go out of the other." This aroused a smile on the boy's face. "Walk quickly, you rascal. You will get killed before long if you don't look out," his uncle shouted and struck him in the face. Munnu began to cry. He followed, resentful and disheartened, thinking how he hated his uncle. But he saw that the fellow on the steel horse, who had been the cause of his being punished, had come to grief 50 yards ahead, having collided with the calf which strayed about among the crowds of men and women near the fruit shops at the crossroads. So he walked along reassured, forgetful still, but sufficiently cautious, with one eye on his uncle ahead of him, another on the row of shops, and an occasional glance behind to see that there was no other steel horse or bicycle, as the juggler had called it, followed. The narrow streets, congested with rows of shops, the regular page number 9. The pattern of those awnings was broken here by the subtle drift of a shadowy lane or a dark grimy gully, there by a glaring patch of sunlight, seemed beautiful to him, especially when a man passed clad in a silk tunic and dhoti and gold embroidered shoes, or when a group of women shuffled along, swinging their elbows and flourishing their green, pink, or purple silk veils. He felt as if he were walking in a dream, in a land of romance where everything was gilded and grand. So different was this world from the world of the mountains. But as he entered deeper into the town and saw some people like himself who had the aspect of the hill folk as they carried weights on their backs, he felt more surprised. He could not realize the significance of this world. There was an eager, fluttering sense of anticipation in his heart at the sight of the grand marble building by which Dayaram had stopped to wait for him. Salam Pirdin, Munnu heard his uncle say as he entered the high-pillared hall of the Imperial Bank. Salam, salam, you are late. The Babu Sahib is angry because there was no one to go and fetch his food at midday, said Pirdin, coughing asthmatically and smoothing his fiery, henna-dyed beard over the gold-braided red coat which he too wore. Munnu guessed that this was the head peon his uncle had often spoken about. Is the Babu in the office then? Said Dayaram with more confidence than usual, guessing how urgent was the Babu's need for a servant and knowing he had a sure job for his nephew. Yes, he is there, grunted Pirdin, waving his hand. But the bags of money are to go to the cantonment, and it is the English mail today, and the Lalas are coming in fast for their business, so you had better be quick. Yes, Mia Sahib, said Dayaram, flattering his colleague with a mode of address reserved for high-class Mohammedans. Then he returned to his nephew. Come with me. The boy followed his uncle into a large, cool room past brass bars around which men crowded, eager-eyed and eager-eared, to see and hear the jingling of bright silver rupees and the rustling of clean currency notes. They entered another room, beneath a swiftly moving pair of wings suspended by an iron rod from the center of the end of page 9, now page 10, the ceiling. Before a huge table on a chair much too big for him sat a little man with an irregular, sallow face, quite vague except for a flat nose, the white spots on his cheeks, and a thin, drooping black moustache, of which each hair seemed to stand out distinct. I bow my forehead to you, Babuji, Dayaram said, joining his hands and dusting his feet as he entered. The Babu lifted his head from the papers before him, but he did not reply. Say, I bow my forehead before you, or long live the gods. To Babuji, whispered Dayaram audibly to Munnu. Munnu mumbled both the courtesies, confused by the pictures aroused in his mind by his entry into a strange world of jingling coins, shuffling paper money, brass bars, tables, chairs, carpets, and swiftly whirring fans. But he did not raise his head to look at the person he was addressed. There was an awkward silence, during which a faint smile of amusement hovered on the Babu's lips before becoming a twisted smile of contempt. Munnu noticed it and looked down, half in fear, half in embarrassment. Maharaj, said Dayaram servilely, as he turned to the majesty before him, I have brought my little nephew for your service. Oh, is that he? The Babu asked, pointing to Munnu. Yes, Janab, Munnu heard his uncle say, and then he heard the command. Join your hands to the Babuji, you rustic. Munnu had been studying the black boots on the Babu's feet as they jutted out from under the table, and he was wondering, as he stood bent in a strained posture of humility, when he would be able to possess such a pair. Long live the gods, he suddenly broke out, joining his hands a little too late to be seen in that reverent posture by the Babu, whose attention had been turned to a swift succession of ringing tones which had started on a black machine on the right side of the table. Yes, sir. Instead of yes, it is YUS. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Fought not the junction Be Tehana. The Babu seemed to be saying to the tube into which he spoke as he held a cap with a twisted cotton wire to his left ear. Munnu wondered whether the language that his would-be master was speaking was the Angrezi speech which the school teacher had said should be learned by all those who wanted to become Babus. He reflected for a moment and then he knew it was Angrezi. End of page 10. Now page 11. From wondering about the Babu's speech, he fell to admiring his clothes. The high, hard white collar which he wore, the enormous turban wound round a pyramidal kulla of red velvet embroidered with gold thread, the khaki coat with big pockets like money bags, the white cotton pajamas and the black boots. If only I had black boots like that, said Munnu to himself, I would have walked much quicker and my feet would not have blistered. Acha, he heard the Babu say, take him to my house and put him in charge of BBG. Dayaram bowed obsequiously, OBSEQUIOUSLY, obsequiously over his joined hands in homage to the Babu. Then he dragged the boy away from the contemplation of the Babu's black boots through the tidy and formal precincts of the Imperial Bank of India up a steep, circuitous road. They went to a block of windowless houses or hovels, squeezed one against another in an irregular pattern of uneven proportions, not without pretensions to a sort of suburban respectability, contradicted though this was by the broken bottles, rusted oil tins and leaking buckets that lay heaped here and there with decaying vegetables and yellow paper and piles of stones and crumbling bricks overgrown with moss. At the farthest end of the block was the Babu's residence, a one-storied square house approached by a veranda on which a western blackboard announced in white English letters to Eastern civilization the glory of Babu Nathumal, sub-accountant, Imperial Bank, Shamnagar. The sight of some buff-coloured bungalows perched higher up on the side of the tortuous hill road lifted Munnu to a rare world of mystery, because these buildings lay enshrouded in an atmosphere of cool, shady trees among neatly trimmed hedges with small palms in green barrels, beds of even grass and an abundance of many-coloured flowers. He wondered who lived there, but his gaze was soon diverted from the heights to which it had aspired to the apparition of a man with a big red face shadowed by a queer khaki basket-like headdress, a collar like one the Babu had worn round his thick scarlet neck, a beautiful jacket which was however somewhat ridiculous as it neither covered his big round paunch nor the heavy buttocks which were shamelessly exposed by the stretch of his khaki breeches, and strange, very end of page 11, now page 12, strange brown boots on his legs up to his knees. An Angrez surely, Munnu said to himself. Salam Hazur, he heard his uncle say abruptly, striking his right foot against the left and standing erect. Munnu dared not look to see what the grim apparition did, but he saw the flourish of a cane and deliberately looked away downhill to the flat roofs of the houses in the town. He is the Bara Sahib of the bank, said Dayaram with a mingled gesture of fear, humility and reverence in answer to his nephew's enquiring eyes, when the man walked down the hill beyond audible distance. Then he lunged forward and began to knock at the door of the Babu's house. They waited in suspense for some time outside the door. Dayaram knocked again, striking the latch again, the worn-out grooves to produce a louder echo. Another little while passed. Dayaram called, "Bibiji, open the door." Then a click lifted behind a side door and a woman appeared. She had a dark face, mobile and without any set form, except that which the tired smile on her thin lips gave it, and a sharp nose over which her brown eyes concentrated in a squint, and her forehead inclined with wrinkles. Her stern, flat-chested form was swathed in muslin sari. She had seen none of the hill women drape it in that way, except Jai Singh's mother, the wife of the landlord, who had originally come from the town and who, the village woman said, was not a woman but a collection of blandishments. 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 Munnu waited in suspense, aware of the surprised stare in the lady's face. He was frightened with the sense of strangeness that assailed him, not only from everything about the woman, but also from the polished corners of the tables, chairs and pictures which showed themselves to his inquisitive eyes. "Bibiji," said Dayaram with joined hands, "I have brought my little nephew to serve you. Here he is." Then he flashed an angry glance at Munnu and said, "Join your hands, you pig, and say, 'I fall at your feet,' to Bibiji." Munnu joined his hands, but he had hardly said, "I fall," when a loud, piercing shriek came from a child somewhere in the inner chambers. Bibiji retreated and exclaimed in a hard, rattling voice, "Oh baby, you have eaten my life. You can't rest even while I'm talking business to anyone. May you die. May your liver burn." End of page number 12, page number 13. "May you fade away, you of the evil star. Now, what is the matter with you? What do you want? You..." And she would have continued, had a sharp, long tongue, such a sharp, long tongue she had, and such inexhaustible resources of breath, had Dayaram not asked, "Will everything be all right then, Bibiji? Shall I leave him here?" Munnu waited anxiously for her to answer. He was frightened of her. Her long neck stood out before his eyes like a hen's. "No, wait, Dayaram," she cried, coming back from the room in which she had disappeared, to qualify her curses with a slap on the face of the child, which made it howl the more. "Have you told the Babuji?" "Yes, Bibiji, I took him to the office first," said Dayaram, "and Babuji said I was to bring him here and put him in your charge." "All right," she said, "but there are vegetables to fetch from the bazaar for the evening meal. Will you?" At this the child at the back room, unable to draw attention by howling, began to shriek continuously, and the woman, retreating, let loose another series of curses. Munnu felt a strange emptiness in him, a kind of embarrassment. The picture of his aunt came before him, but she never abused or cursed so much, and in his heart there was a lonely song, a melancholy wail, asking, not pointedly, but in a vague, uncertain rhythm, what life in this woman's house would prove. "Will you go and tell Babuji to buy the vegetables when he leaves office and send them by the boy?" came the voice of his mistress suddenly to Munnu's ears. He did not attend to it for a moment. He was possessed by sadness and self-pity. He was tired after the long march through the hills, and he was hungry. He had thought that he would be able to sit down when he reached the destination, but that he would be given food according to the custom which prevails in all Indian homes of offering food to guests and visitors at whatever time of the day they arrive. Instead, he was being asked to go on an errand the very minute he arrived. Perhaps the custom in the towns are different, he thought, with a sinking feeling. "All right, Bibiji," said Dayaram coolly. He had become too inured to the caprices of his masters to be resentful like his nephew. End of page 13, page number 14. "Come, oi Munnu," he said, walking along. "You will be looked after here. You will get plenty to eat in this home. And the Babu said he would pay us 3 rupees a month. I will show you my room near the office. Come down there on your off day. Don't forget to do your best for the masters. You are their servant and they are kind people. As Munnu listened to this, tears came rushing to his eyes, and through the tears he could see the high rocks, the great granite hills, grey in the blaze of the sun and silver line of the Beas, on the banks of which the herds had moved defiance to the earth and the sky, wandering freely for miles and miles.